That's correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. I have a small background on you, but not much I could find, eh? I see you're an experienced social worker with a background in neuro-rehabilitative social work. That sounds very, very amazing.
Yeah, no, it was an absolutely wonderful experience. I worked at one of the private hospitals in Glenwood in a rehab unit that specializes in people with brain and back injuries. That's what brought me to Durban in 2009. Never looked back. That's where my background lies. And I do miss it sometimes. It was a simpler life, I can tell you that.
I can imagine, politics is not for the faint-hearted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I joined politics in about 2011 when I was the ward councillor for Ward 27, which is Morningside and Greyville.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, well, that's great. It's great to have someone of your stature as part of our KZN portfolio. It's we hope to see a lot of improvement in the future.
Absolutely. We are here to serve. KZN is definitely worth saving, and that's what I'm here for, is to try and work with the people of KZN to make KZN, to build KZN better.
Of course, we all everyone that's here currently in KZN calls this home, and a lot of us don't have any intention of leaving. So we can only try and assist where we can and try and make this a better place for everyone to live in.
Absolutely, and it's one of the things I love about KZN. It's just this tapestry of different cultures, different peoples, different religions, all coming together. 90% of the time we get along, we live in peace. We do have our hiccups, of course, like this, as any family will have. But yes. I do think that KZN, and we have all the building blocks to be the most prosperous province in the country. From our great climate to our natural resources we can far overtake places like the Western Cape, and you can actually swim in our ocean and survive winter. So I do think that KZN has all the potential, including the human potential. We just have to pull together and walk on the right path together.
Agreed, 100%. So MEC, our topic for today is the outcomes of the KZN Build Better conference, property management. So do you want to just briefly tell us what that was about? How did that come about? How did this conference come about, and what were the main takeaways from the conference?
Absolutely. So when I took office, when the government of provincial unity was formed, and the party I belonged to joined the unity government, and I got this portfolio, one of the first things I said is that we need to do a full audit of the properties that government owns. Because shockingly, government doesn't always know what it owns, which is quite concerning. What we do know now is that the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, which is that oversees all properties that belong to the provincial government, owns over 10,800 properties across KZN. And we do know many of these properties are unutilized or underutilized, so they're not fully being used, or they're standing empty. Some of them are bad buildings, or buildings that's been invaded and hijacked. Which is a very uniquely South African thing. I think we can even hijack a whole building. And we say to ourselves, but we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we looked at some of our sister departments, like the National Department of Public Works, Transnet, Praza, and other parastatals, and realized and then all the municipalities, of course, and between us, we own thousands and thousands of properties across the province. And government is not good with coming up with new, fresh ideas. We are very good with identifying problems. So what we said with this conference is, let's invite experts in the property industry. Let's invite developers. Let's invite NGOs, NPOs, traditional leaders, faith-based organizations. Let's get it all together. And let's say, well, this is the properties we have. This is the type of properties we have. Come up with solutions. Let's find out together. Do we need to change our laws and regulations to make it easier for you to partner with us? Is there buildings that we can use together? And I'll give you quick two examples. One is that we pay about 1.4 billion rand a year in leases for government departments to lease offices. Yet we own so many buildings, and that just didn't sit right with me. So one of the things that we started doing is, there's a building on the Esplanade that's quite infamous, called the Esplanade Government Building. that's been standing empty for many years. It can house literally hundreds and hundreds of office workers. So we partners with the private sector for a public-private partnership. That building is in the process now of being renovated. It's going to be a very world-class building, full green technology, energy saving, all those type of things. So then we can move all the government departments that we're currently leasing buildings for in eThekwini into that one building, and we'll be saving millions and millions of rands in leases. Other examples is that we have empty schools that are no longer being used in rural areas, for instance. So reaching out to traditional leaders, to faith-based organizations, and said, is there anything you can do with these schools? Do you want to take a long-term lease at no or little cost with us? So we still own the property, but you can develop it into a skills center or community center or whatever the case might be, what the need of the community is. And then, of course, the private sector is also coming to us. We know where there's a need for social housing, low-cost housing, student housing across the province. So those are the type of things we wanted to look at, and it was an amazing success. And I realized this once again. There are so many investors, so many community groups that just want to make this province work, and they want to partner with government, but government makes it so difficult. So that's what we were looking at, and I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things that comes out. And one is that we're already putting 133 properties on the market across the province that we don't need as a department, as government, and we're going to put that on the market either for lease and sale, and say to people, come to us, come with suggestions, and let's get this pieces of land productive for the people of KZN.
That's amazing.
That was a mouthful. I do apologize.
Yeah, no, that was excellent. Just before we move on to the rest of the questions I have, this 133 properties that you have that you're going to put out there, how would people find out where these are and what type of properties, and how would they contact the government to now partner with the government for these properties? Or in these properties?
That's an excellent question. So most of these, over 100 of these, are empty parcels of land that we don't use across the province. And then there's a couple of buildings. I know there's 7 buildings that is currently abandoned buildings that we're also going to put on. People can just visit our website for public works in KZN. They can Google it. We advertise all of this on our website, and as per law, we will be advertising it in the media, the print media as well. And of course, it has to go through anything like government. You know, we have very strict regulations for doing business with anyone. So it has to go through a tender process or a bidding process, and all those things will be explained on our webpage. People are very welcome to then go visit these properties, see if they think they can do something with it. The buildings itself, we're doing slightly differently. We're asking for people to come with proposals. So people can come with a proposal and say, we don't want to buy it, we want to lease it from government for 20 years or 25 years or 40 years or 99 years, which is the longest lease we can do. And this is what we want to use with the building. This is how the community will benefit. This is how government will benefit. And this is what we as the contractors will benefit. So it will all be there. I think it was put on today or tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And that we really want to go to people and say, come with suggestions, because we really want to make this land and these properties work for the people.
And where do they make those suggestions?
It will also be on the webpage. So the public proposal is done like a tender. So it's done through the firm process that you say, these are the suggestions that we come forward with. Of course, you know, the finances and all of that will then also be put there. But we're also discussing with financial institutions, how can we assist with finances? Because I don't want a situation where people who are already big players in the property markets are the only one that buys these. So we're also trying to find ways, together with financial institutions, to assist people from disadvantaged backgrounds, new players in the property market. So we make sure that it's a very fair process that anybody can participate on.
That's great. I also think you don't want to only have property. The people that are in property already, you want new entries into the market. You want to partner with NGOs and stuff like that as well.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's a very important part of government is that we have to be equity. We have to make sure everybody gets a fair chance. You know, it is unfortunately so that the property market has become dominated by a couple of small, big companies across the country. And we want to make sure that we don't just get nominated by them, but that everybody, because, you know, as I said, it's very important for us that properties must serve the communities in the end of the day. So if they get bought up and they just get turned into more expensive housing estates, that's not what we want. You know, we really want the needs of the people on the ground to be met.
Correct. That's actually so good to hear from someone in government. Thank you. Appreciate that.
We do try to be nice sometimes.
Another question I have for you is, were there any significant changes or trends discussed at the conference that could shape the future of property management in the region?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that so many of the people there explained to us, because the first day was us talking, and the second day I was very clear that it's for us to listen. And government has become marvelous at talking. We've become quite rubbish at listening. So I'm trying to switch that around and becoming a bit more of a listening government in our department. So we sat down and we had these breakaway sessions, and we said to people, come with your suggestions, but also your challenges. And one thing became very clear is that the regulations that's been put in place has made it almost impossible to do business with government. So people said, you really need to simplify the regulations. You really need to simplify the forms. You need to simplify the hoops we have to jump through to be able to do business with you, to partner with you, to do these things with you. And that, of course, unfortunately, most of these regulations are made on a national level. But good news is that the national department partnered with us in this conference. And we've now taken it to both the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Works nationally, Minister Dean McPherson, and said to him, all right, help us to simplify these matters. And it's good news that later this year, the National Treasury will publish more simplified regulations for the triple Ps, the public-private partnerships, which will help us tremendously. The second thing that came out, and this is something that keeps me awake at night, unfortunately, is that when you work as a contractor for government, or you're partner of government, we're not always that fast with paying. And that causes massive knock-on effects for the people that's partnering with us. And that, unfortunately, is an absolute truth. I can't deny that. But that's something that we've also really worked very hard to turn around as the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. When I took office in June last year, our debt to contractors were over 800 million rand. We've reduced that to just over 200 million rand. Now, that's still 200 million rand too much, because that means there's still contractors that we owe that money to, and that's not right. But I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. So that's also come out, and we've already now worked with the private sector, and they came with very good suggestions on how we can also better manage that. And then I think the third one is that I'm very keen to make better use of technology. This department is sometimes still a bit stuck in the 90s. And there were a lot of companies, tech companies also there. They came with excellent suggestions how we can modernize the department, modernize our buildings, make it serve people better. And I'm quite excited. I have quite a few meetings lined up for this week with some of these companies to see how we can work together, just to bring this department kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Oh, wonderful news to hear. Next question. Can you elaborate on any new technologies or innovations presented at the conference that could improve property management in KZN?
Absolutely. Let me start with a very simple one that we've already started. I spoke about the Esplanade government building that we've now partnered with. That building, for instance, the lifts in that building is going to be brand new technology that generates electricity when it goes down, which means it's not going to be a net user of electricity. It's also actually going to generate electricity that gets pumped back into the system. That's one example of how we can be more innovative and use green technology to save money, but also protect our environment, which I think is very important. A second thing that's come out, because we do know, and while I'm on the theme of environment, that KZN, unfortunately, has borne the brunt of climate change challenges within South Africa, and the floods of 2022, and the tornadoes that hit places like Tongaat, just shows us how we're now facing a totally different type of climate than we were used to 10 or 20 years ago. So a lot of technology was discussed for alternative building materials, for building more climate resilient buildings that can actually withstand storms and floods, and especially how we can retrofit our current buildings that we partner with for that. And I'm very excited about some of those innovations that's come out. And then for building management, our building management system currently, because we manage all government buildings for the provincial government across the province, like I said, over 10,000 properties, and it's still a paper-based system. So a lot of the private sector guys came to us and said, listen, there's so much better ways to do this that's going to be cheaper. We're willing to partner with you, willing to help you set these things up, so which will make it much quicker for us. Because unfortunately, part of the buildings that, for instance, that we manage are schools. And from the point that a principal will report to us that, let's say, someone broke into the school and vandalized the doors, from the time they report it to the time we fix it can take up to 6 months, which is totally unacceptable to me. But if we start using technology, that turnaround time can be much quicker, which means the services that people get on the ground is going to be much improved. So that's also one of the things we're looking at. And the fact of the matter is technology works like that in the beginning you have a high cost to institute technology, but it's getting cheaper and cheaper. But once you've instituted, it starts paying for itself because it's quicker, it's cheaper to run, easier to manage. And then the last one is that we instituted last year already that all our bid committee meetings for tenders are now being recorded audio visually, and we use AI technology and all those type of things. Since we've done it, we've had no issues with tender fraud within those meetings, which is a big improvement. But we can take it even further because currently anybody that's tendered for anything in provincial government knows it's still paper-based. You have to fill in those massive difficult forms. You might miss a tick box here, then your bid is thrown out for being incomplete. We're now going to make it electronic, making it much harder for any corruption to get in there, and also make it much easier for people to fill in those forms. Of course, there will still be a paper-based element for people that don't have access to data and all of that. But that are some of the things we discussed at the conference, how we can better use technology to make this a more modern and a much more a department for much quicker turnaround time.
This tender process that you're talking about, is that still to come, or is that implemented already?
No, we started implementing it in October last year. And interestingly enough, before we implemented it, almost all tenders went to appeal. So whoever lost the tender will take us to court, and which means we can't start our contracts, we can't start our projects, and it costs us a lot of money in legal fees. Since we've implemented it, we've had none of our tenders being appealed. We're no longer spending all this time in courts to fight these things because now people know we are watching, we are keeping the records, and no dirty business can happen within. I mean, we can't. I'm not naive thinking it's going to 100% get rid of the corruption within the because I can only control what happens in that room where we're recording. But I think it's made a huge impact on tenders, and it's worked so well that from across the country we're now getting other government departments contacting us saying, "How did you do it? We want the same system. Help us set it up."
Yeah, because that's amazing. If it needs to be across the board in all government departments. That's something that's so important and should have been done 10 years ago already.
You're actually hitting the nail on the head here. Something that I would have thought is logical turned out to be not logical. And people say, oh, this is great innovation. It's not innovation. Recording technology is not something new. Recording technology was around in the 80s when I was pressing record, listening to the radio, trying to get my music, Now I've given away my age. So it's nothing new. It's just much better technology, obviously, now. And I'm a bit shocked that it hasn't been done before, but now we're doing it. And like I said, we're looking at using AI and all those type of things. We're talking to other departments. I know the Western Cape has moved quite far in exploring AI to assist them with these type of things. And technology is there for us, and it's about how you use it. Some people are scared of technology. It scares me sometimes. But it's about how you use it. And if you can use it to improve services to people, then we must definitely embrace it as government.
Martin, in terms of the technology, how do you find South Africa comparatively to the rest of the world, namely the developed countries like the US and Europe and stuff? Are we far behind, or are we on track?
No, unfortunately, I think we are extremely far behind other countries, but it's not something that we can't catch up quite quickly. South Africans are very innovative people. We have extremely intelligent and smart people in this country. And I do believe that if we just had a political will, we put some investment in it, I really think we can catch up. As much as I'm not necessarily the person's biggest fan, but Elon Musk is from South Africa. That's the type of brains we do have. I don't like his politics, but I can't deny his intelligence when it comes to technology. Those are the type of things that we really need to look at. And we are very, very far behind, unfortunately. South Africa still often talks about the fourth industrial revolution. The rest of the world's in the fifth industrial revolution. We're still lagging behind in the third one in some instances. We had load shedding again this weekend as an example. But I do think we can catch up. Luckily, it's that type of thing. The technology is there. We just need to bring it in. We just need to get our own young people to be very involved in it. And I want to encourage young people, look into doing, look for jobs in that type of industry, for studying that type of industry. It's very important that if you're going to leave school and start looking for other jobs or studying, I read the other day, someone said that 60% of the jobs we currently have will be obsolete in 50 years. So it's important for us to start future or making ourselves safe for the future, and technology is the right way to go.
100%. That is actually very, very scary for a lot of us.
Absolutely. At least politicians, I think, will still be around in 50 years' time, but I'm not just some of the other jobs.
We can easily replace you guys with AI, eh?
Listen, let me say no comment. Let me play the safe role there.
I'm just kidding, Martin. Martin, in terms of the conference, how do the outcomes of the conference address the current challenges faced by property managers, such as maintenance, tenant relations, and regulatory compliance? I know you touched a bit on regulatory compliance, but
Yep.
yeah.
So one thing also, I didn't want this to be a talk shop. And that's quite what happens with these government conferences. We were very careful who we invited to it, to make sure it's actually people that understand that time is money, and that we need to have very clear outcomes. That's why we had the breakaway sessions. We came with some very clear outcomes of that. We're busy compiling that document. The information was a lot more than we initially anticipated. So, the staff of the department is working full out since last week, and we will then publish a document saying this is the actual outcomes, the suggestions. And we looked at things like what are the short-term measures that we could put in place immediately, and that's like putting certain properties on the market and so forth. And what is the long-term ones, which is regulatory thing. But the other thing that came out from the conference that we didn't expect is that the private sector property managers and then from the public sector and from the community sector or NGOs all said the same thing, that we're not coordinating. So we're all working in our own different fields, different sectors, and things are falling through the cracks. So I think the other big important thing that came out from this is that we need to be a lot more proactive, communicate, work much closer as an industry, because government is not opposition to the private sector. We're working in a different type of field, for a different type of environment, but we do the same thing in the end of the day. So I think that is also a very, very important thing that's come out, is that the different sectors said, all right, let's work together, because KZN is worth saving. And there's some amazing things happening. I mean, we don't talk enough about like the Club Med development on the North Coast, which is going to bring millions of rands of investment for tourism into the province. So the private sector is working. Government needs to catch up. We need to do our part as well. And the other part that came out of that is that also we said to the private sector, listen, you need the infrastructure. We as government has to supply the infrastructure, but we are a cash-strapped government. How can we partner on that? And we're also busy putting things in place to look at the infrastructure of the province to assist the property market, because that's the other big challenge the property market is facing. They can't develop if there's no water, if there's no electricity, if there's no roads, or if those are all bad. And that's the other thing that we said, okay, let's work together on this one.
Thank you. Were there any key discussions or insights on sustainability and eco-friendly practices in property management shared? And you mentioned a little bit about like the lift.
Yes.
That's quite cool. Hopefully, looking forward to seeing something like that. But yeah, anything else that has come about from the conference?
The one thing about the lift that scares me is the faster it goes down, the more electricity it generates. I'm not quite sure how fast it's going to drop. But so yes, it was actually a major point of discussion and one of the key factors that we looked at. And we had some experts coming to address the conference, experts from that type of environment. And I'll give an example. Something I'm quite passionate about is that we know that KwaZulu-Natal's climate is great for the growing of hemp or marijuana plants, as it's better known maybe. And that hemp is used in the world quite extensively for making bricks and making cement. And that cement is a lot more environmentally friendly than the cement we currently make, because the cement that's currently made uses a lot of water and creates a lot of pollution. You need two things to make hemp cement, and that's the hemp plant and lime. We do have lime mines in KZN in the South Coast. And that's some of the things we're looking at, is how can we develop factories that creates these bricks and cement, so we can start building that or start retrofitting our buildings with it and make them a lot more environmentally friendly. The other thing we looked at, obviously, is renewable energy. It's a field that KZN is lagging far behind. If you go to the Eastern Cape, and KZN doesn't like being behind the Eastern Cape, it's one province we have to beat. And in the Eastern Cape, if you drive past places like Jeffreys Bay, Humansdorp, those places, and it's just everywhere you drive is windmills generating electricity. And we do have an opportunity to do the same here. We do have good places to build solar farms, to become a bit less dependent on coal, become a bit less dependent on Eskom, and generate electricity within our province to help boost. And a lot of the people said, but that will also help the market. But together with that, if you go to cities like Cape Town, if you have solar panels on your building, like where your offices are, whatever you create extra that you don't use in the building gets pumped into the grid, and you get paid for that, or it gets deducted from your electricity bill. And that's the type of things that property developers said, but they want that, because that gives them an incentive to make their buildings a lot more environmentally friendly. They can save some money because solar panels are not cheap, or the batteries at least are not very cheap. So those are the type of things from a regulatory point of view that we will now engage with municipalities and say, can we put this in place and make it much better for people in the property market to make their buildings friendlier. And then the last very important thing that we discussed is that we've fallen into a very bad habit. When a storm comes and destroys a clinic or some of our infrastructure, we rebuild it exactly as it was. And then 2 years later, another storm comes and destroys exactly the same building, and then we are very shocked that it happened. So we said we also must now start, when we have to rebuild something, we have to rebuild it better, stronger, using the technology that's around to make it storm resilient and climate resilient. And that's the other thing that we discussed quite a few things about. And a lot of the tertiary institutions says they want to partner with us and find better ways to rebuild which is destroyed by climate change.
You mentioned windmills and stuff. I've always been curious to know why we never had that in KZN. Any specific reason why they've never taken off here?
Yeah, I'm also a bit surprised that it hasn't really taken off. Some of these big smart people, much smarter than me, did mapping of the whole country, and we do have areas that is very good for wind farming, if you want to call it that, especially on the coast up north towards places like Mtlathuze, Richards Bay, Mpangeni, those areas. There are places that's really, really good for type of wind farms. For solar farms around Newcastle and Amajuba district, there's some areas there that's really good for solar farms. And we do have the land. So I do think it was a bit of a political will. And also previously, the laws to create own electricity was not as easy, as Eskom had the monopoly on it. But those regulations has now changed, and provinces and municipalities can apply, and private sector can now play in this environment as well. So I think now the climate is much better for us to look at it. We've had a lot of interest from big foreign players in this market who want to come in, partner with local companies and all of that. So I do think it's something we must now seriously push for. As I was a bit worried that if we don't have load shedding, people's going to not feel that push to start generating renewable energy. But I do think it's still there. And I think this weekend just reminded us the crisis is not over. It's just calmed down a little bit. So I do think now is really the time for us to push for it. But again, that is environment much better for the private sector to play. And we as a Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and Government can then create the environment, assist, if there's land that needs to be made available, we can look at that. But this is something that we've learned. Private sector is much better at providing the services than we in government is.
Agreed. What role do you think collaboration between local government, developers and property managers will play in shaping the future of KZN property market?
So that also came up, and thank you for raising it. And I'm very happy that it came in an environment where we've, as a department, negotiated and signed the MOU with the Metro of eThekwini, and we'll be doing it with some of the other municipalities as well. One of the big challenges that property developers have raised with us is that getting planning permission from the city, getting your plans approved, and all those things is a long, arduous process and can take years sometimes. and that is really then stifling development. So I think that's one place where we can definitely also partner and say, listen, how can we streamline the process? How can we also assist our municipalities to make it easier to get your plans approved and get your certificates and all the things that you need from the engineers and all those type of things. And from eThekwini's side, there were other municipalities as well. They seem quite keen to now work with that and make that happen a lot quicker and unlock. The other thing is, as well, as I said earlier, municipalities also own a lot of land that they no longer necessarily use. So that's the other place that we said, all right, what can you also make available and make it easier for people to find land? And then the last one is that I spoke about bad buildings right in the beginning, buildings that are invaded or hijacked, whatever the case might be. We just handed over, or in the process of handing over, 3 such buildings in the CBD of eThekwini, which is West Point Lodge, which is on Esplanade, the Siemens Institute, which is on Mahatma Gandhi Road, and the Palm Beach Hotel, which is on South Beach. And there we were also working with the municipality to get the private sector developers to partner with them to make those mixed-use buildings, so that part of the building can be social housing, flats that's made available for people that is a very low income. And part of it can then be entry-level flats that's run by the private sector that they rent out or sell, whatever the case might be. They manage the building, taking that responsibility away, but we're still helping the housing crisis within the city. And I think that's a very good example of how the private sector and government can partner together and collaborate and meet different needs at the same time. And I'll give the EGB building again as an example, because that's going to be a mixed-use building. It's going to have shops in it. It's going to have private offices and government offices. And that just shows that if we work together, we can meet all our needs to the benefit of everyone.
That's great. And you mentioned South Beach, and just something came to mind was that that theme park that we had in South Beach, and the guy's lease was ended.
Yeah,
everyone's curious to know what's the plans with that that area or that part of the beachfront.
Yeah. So that falls under eThekwini, but we have regular meetings with eThekwini. So let me please raise that with Mayor Kaba and his team. And next time we speak, I'll be able to give you some feedback. I don't want to give an answer if I don't have all the information. And luckily or unluckily, that doesn't fall under my department, but we can definitely engage with eThekwini, because obviously it's to the benefit of the people of KZN in that as well.
Yes, thank you. Understood. I've got a question from Mr. Isa Hassam. He says, congratulations on getting back the dilapidated and hijacked buildings in KZN. But what assistance is there for the private sector who have similar issues? Example, who do they call if their building is occupied by drug dealers or and simply refuse to pay rent or vacate?
I think that also comes to the regulatory things that you spoke about earlier that we need to engage with national government on, because unfortunately the process to deal with that is extremely difficult, even for government departments. You have to go to court, you have to get eviction orders, you have to get subs to then implement those eviction orders. Courts don't always give it to you, or they demand you must give alternative accommodation. And what we're saying is, while we still understand that homeless people or people living in those buildings have some rights under the Constitution, we must also recognize the rights of the person who's the owner of the property and the people who live around it, and having a safe environment. So unfortunately for Mr. Issa, I don't have a simple answer. And as a government department, we can't intervene in private properties. The Constitution just purely doesn't allow us to. But it is something that from a government point of view, we are engaging with the national departments, with SAPS, with the Department of Justice, saying, how can we make this better? Because it's just not right the way it is. It's a bit skewed to the one side, and we don't think it's easy enough for people to protect their own properties. So right now, the only answer is to go through the courts, which is a very expensive process. But Mr. Issa is very welcome to email my office as well, and we can see how we can put him in touch maybe with the right people. But even us as a government department has to go through his processes. And so trust me, I understand his frustration, because that's my frustration on a daily basis.
And he also wants to know, like, what happens in terms of the large bill of rates and utilities which rake up in instances like that. Is the municipality willing to write off those kind of debts? Is there Is there someone you can talk to in those kind of instances? Or is
It's
it
a really
all
good
gotta-
question, and I want to thank Mr. Isa for raising that question. Let me also then put that on my list of things to discuss with Mayor Kaba and the other mayors, because it's not purely a eThekwini matter, because obviously rates is not something our departments directly. I'm the biggest rate payer in KZN at the moment with all the buildings we
Yes.
own. So let me engage with eThekwini on that one, and I can provide you with written feedback on that. I know from my days as a councillor, you have to have your building declared as an invaded or bad building, and then the city will assist you with that. But let me get all the correct information, and I'll provide you a written answer to that as soon as possible.
He's also asking if the city has like a task force to deal with cases like this. I know you mentioned it, you'll have to go legally, but is there no way to have a task force like this to assist private property owners?
Task force, I'm not quite sure how well they are staffed at this moment. I haven't been with eThekwini since 2019. They used to have a task force, which was the bad building task team, that would also then assist private owners. But the law, unfortunately, currently says the responsibility is on the owner. So the financial onus is on the owner. And not on the state in cases like that. My belief is that, but there is still a law being broken, and if a law is being broken, of course, the government has a responsibility to assist the law-abiding citizen against the law-breaking citizen, and I think that should be very, very clear. But there is a task team. I know through Safer Cities can be contacted, or Metro Police can be contacted, or the best department actually used to deal with it is the Town Planning Department through their Building Inspectorate.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you for that comments. Thank you, Mr. Isa. Appreciate your question. MEC, looking forward, what are the next steps for property managers in KZN to implement the strategies or practices discussed at the Build KZN Better conference?
Yeah, I think one of the major things now is that we have to really focus on what the outcomes is that we want to reach, and become quite goal orientated as a sector, but also focus on these partnerships. Already since the conference, we've, like I said, my meetings are now back to back with people who said, all right, we now are very excited, we're very keen. But the one thing is, and it's not just only for this, it's for everything that the new government of provincial unity is now involved in, is that we all have to understand that government has to change the way it does business. It has to change the way it delivers services. And we alone cannot solve the problems of KZN. That, unfortunately, is the reality. The provincial deficit at one stage was almost 9 billion rand that we're going to be short on our budget. It has been cut quite significantly by my colleague, MEC Rogers, but it's still a massive deficit. So the major thing going forward is that partnership between NPOs and NGOs, between traditional leaders, between faith-based organizations, between the private sector and government is the only way forward. We can't just sit back and wait for government to deliver alone. Yes, government must deliver. That's why we pay taxes, and that's why you elect people like me to be in office. But by building partnerships, that's beneficial for everyone. And I think that's the major outcome of this. And as I said, we are busy compiling the document from this, and we will release that to you in the media as well to make sure that everybody knows what the outcomes are and what the way forward is. But I think the major thing is something I haven't experienced since 1994 is there's such an excitement on the ground from people on the ground, but also from business and investors saying, yes, we want to partner, we want to build this province and the country better, and now we see there's a way forward for us to do so.
You know, I must commend you. I think having people like you in government and in positions that you're in, it makes people, the public, or the people on the ground want to partner with government. It makes people want to be optimistic about KZN, about our country. So thank you. Appreciate your effort, and we hope to see more people like you in government going forward.
Thank you so much. I can only the strength that people give me, so keep me in your prayers, and that's how we will do so. Thank you so much.
Of course. From my side, I don't have any more questions. Do you have any? Want to have any closing remarks before we close?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I know there's also a lot of uncertainty regarding property rights and all of that. And I think people must also just remain calm. While there are definitely some challenges in the expropriation law, every country in the world has an expropriation law. We've always had one in South Africa. There's just a couple of the matters in that law that myself and the party I belong to are concerned about, that we'll ask the Constitutional Court to measure by the constitutionality. And that's why we should remain calm, because South Africa has good checks and balances in place. But no one is coming for anybody's land right now. That's definitely not going to happen. It's also not what the law says. And I think, but the major thing is, and you touched on the positivity, I'm very passionate about this province, and people expected the worst for the elections last year for KZN. We had visions of riots and all those things again. And the people of KZN has proven that we want to be a peaceful people, we want to be a prosperous province, and that we want to work together to build a better future for everyone. And I think that's a positivity. It's not me, it's every voter, it's every person in KZN, it's every person from the ones that's unemployed, struggling to make a better living, to those who are business owners. Everybody really wants the same thing, and that's to build our province better. So I'm grateful to the people that's holding my hands, raising my hands up. But let's really just look past our differences and let's work together to make this the greatest province. It already is the greatest province in many ways, but let's make this the most prosperous province in South Africa.
Agreed. Thank you very much, MEC Martin Meyer, MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure. Your time and input has been much appreciated. Valuable input to take away today. From myself, Zain Mitha at Minara Chamber of Commerce, and from Al Ansar Studios, thank you very much, and look forward to hosting you again sometime in the future. To our listeners, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for tuning in. Till next week. See you then. Assalamu alaikum.